the urban penguin, the marmalade to your toast.
Hello and a really big warm welcome to this presentation from the Urban Penguin. My name is Andrew Mallet, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at a couple of things. The first is going to be Nmap, the port scanner. We're going to be able to scan our network to determine hosts that are up. But we also need to grab information from that output, so we need to extract the output. And to do that, we're going to look at regular expressions. Now, regular expressions are not everybody's best friend. However, they are portable across distributions and even operating systems, so you're going to find them everywhere. And they are really powerful. So why don't you take a look at this as we go through and seeing how we can combine regular expressions and Nmap to counterattack vulnerabilities on our system. So here we are working at the glorious Pixel Playground, a Pixel Playground that is indeed my Ubuntu 24.04 system. But also I have some virtual machines that are running on this host, a couple of Rocky 9.5 systems. So we're going to be taking a look at using Nmap to run some port scanning, and we can check for some vulnerabilities and mitigate those vulnerabilities. If we look at the moment, using SSHD -T, I can go through and check the running settings of my server. It's obviously very verbose, so if I go through and grep for max, my message authentication codes, and these are the ciphers that are used to ensure the integrity of our messages between client and server. Now, our message ciphers I'm looking here are not too bad, but this is a system that I use all of the time, and I've already configured the more secure ciphers on this. So we have 5 ciphers showing on here for our message authentication codes, but we don't want to do this necessarily on every system. We might want to check across a range of systems to see what weak message authentication codes are in use. And that's where our tool Nmap can come in. Now, say I've got a virtual machine network that is running on this Ubuntu host. And if I run virsh list, you can see I've got a couple of Rocky 9.5 systems. And obviously this is a virtual network that I own, so I'm quite happy to scan the network. And the scanning tool that we're going to use is Nmap. It's usually available through your distribution, so it shouldn't be anything difficult to install. We're going to then go through and run this with sudo and apt install and Nmap. So you can see then that it is already installed on this system, so we are good to go. And then if we look at the Nmap scan, we're first of all going to find hosts that are available on our network. So -S for our scan, N for the network, and I'm obviously putting in the network range for my virtual network. Make sure that you have permission or the authority to scan a network before you start just doing this type of activity. So I can go through and take a look at the hosts that respond to our scan. As we go through and start it, we can see then that I've got 3 hosts as expected that are up on this network. And we can see their IP addresses and or their host name if we can resolve their host name. So this is looking good. But I really want to grab information out of this. The information is a little bit too verbose. So if I just go through and grep for Nmap, you can see that I just get the one line now coming back. And it's included in that. We've got the host name or the IP address or both. I'd like to work just with the IP address. So that seems the easiest, as it's going to work across all 3 lines. Alternatively, I could look at grabbing field 5. That's going to be Ubuntu and the 2 IP addresses. But we want to take a look at the power of our regular expressions. So we're going to then pipe this to another grep. And this time we're going to use an enhanced regular expression rather than the basic regular expression engine. We like enhanced, don't we? And we're going to use a lowercase o, which is specifying only to return the match and not the complete line. And that is a really big key here. We want to return just the IP address. So we go into our regular expression and just put it in, I'm using single quotes, and we're going to create a regular expression group. And we do that with the parentheses. You'll see why as we go through, because we want to grab the IP address. The IP address is going to start with a number 0 through to 9, and we're going to have a minimum of 1 followed by a maximum of 3. So we can have 1 up to 3 numbers. And those numbers are going to be followed by a dot, but we have to escape the dot as it's a meta character inside of our regular expression. And this is the group, so we can then end the group. We've grouped it together like this because we can make our regular expression shorter by saying we want this repeated 3 times. And that's what a dotted decimal IP address is. We have 3 blocks of numbers that are followed by a dot. The last block of numbers doesn't have a dot following it. So we can go through and just say that we want numbers 0 through to 9. And again, inside of our brace brackets, we want a minimum of 1 with a maximum of 3 numbers. And this, you'll be glad to hear, is the end of our regular expression, so close our quote. Now you'll really start to understand the power as we get to just the IP addresses coming back. And that really wasn't that difficult, was it? Now, I could save these IPs to a file and I can scan a list of ranges from a file. However, I like the idea that this is dynamic. So as more hosts then come onto my network, I'm scanning those rather than a static list from a file. So with that done, let's clear our screen with Control and L. I can up arrow key, but I'm just going to use Control and A to move to the beginning of the line, and I'm just going to push this in a little bit, so just put a few spaces. We want to keep it, and we don't want to execute it at the moment. So we're going to run Nmap again, so let's run another Nmap scan. And we're going to check the version of SSH. So we can go through and do our port. Let's just space it out so it's readable. And we're going to do a scan, but we're looking for version information. So we've got the uppercase V. I'm going to put my dollar symbol and then my parentheses. And the previous command, I'm going to make sure is included inside of the parentheses. So we evaluate the output of the command. Now we know that that is going to return a list of IP addresses. So for each of the available IP addresses, we're going to print the version of SSH that is running. And we can see then that we are getting different versions coming back. On Ubuntu, we've got 9.6 and then 8.7 on our Rocky 9.5 systems. But that's often what we see, and that's the differences really between our enterprise software and Ubuntu. So let's clear the screen again. And we can go back to our command. And instead of getting the version now, we can look for vulnerabilities. So if I then go through and do a ---- script, so still working on port 22, our SSH server, and then we can look at SSH2 -enum for enumerate dash and then algos. Thankfully, you don't have to put algorithms in. So this is looking at all of the algorithms in use, not just the message authentication codes. But then as I go through and take a look at the Mac algorithms, this will be on my Rocky system. And we can see that we have 8, including some older ones. And if I scroll up, I should be able to see that we have 5, I think it was, on our Ubuntu system. Now, that's not a difference between Ubuntu and Rocky. It's just that I've already secured my Ubuntu host. But we want to make sure that they all have a stronger list and removing especially those SHA-1 algorithms. Now, on my Ubuntu host, I already have Ansible, the configuration management system, installed and configured. We can see this if I quickly do an Ansible all -m ping, which is just a Python ping, making sure we're getting a response from the Python interpreter on the system. I can communicate through the group all. Well, let's go through then and create ourselves a playbook. And in our playbook, we can mitigate the weak algorithms. So if I go through and I'm just going to paste it in, I'm not going to type it all out. But we have a handler that is restarting the SSH service, and we're using a variable for our SSH service. That SSH service variable is then coming from a fact for the operating system family. And let me just correct this. This seems to have gone in wrong. This should be SSHD for our Red Hat based systems. And we can also see that we are then sending out the list of Macs that we feel are acceptable. And they're going to a custom configuration inside of the SSHD. If we change that configuration, then we restart the SSH service. And I'm just going to change the list of hosts to all. So it will process the 3 hosts that we have in that group. And with that done, I can save my changes. And now, with those changes made, if we run the playbook, so Ansible playbook and then secure ssh.yaml, we can see then that runs through nicely. We've made the configuration change, and we've restarted our hosts. And when we go through then and start looking at running it again, because we meet the required configuration, there's no changes and no restart of the SSH service that is needed. Now, the real test then is to go back and run our Nmap. Running the script, we can then go through and see the output towards the bottom then is our Mac algorithms. This will be for our Rocky host. And we can see that we've got 5 where we previously had 8. We've left out the weaker algorithms.
All that is left to say is thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this, then you are probably sadder than I first thought. For more of this drivel, please subscribe, like and comment to @TheUrbanPenguin.